Exclusive. Exclusive. Exclusive.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jasmine Hall. I'd like to start by thanking our ancestors for whom all of this is possible. Welcome to our program. Tonight I'll be interviewing attorney LeGrand Clegg. So great to have you with us this evening.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. So I have so many things I'm excited to talk to you about tonight. But I just want to first start with acknowledging the fact that you are both a historian and an attorney. And I'm really curious of how you've been able to find synthesis in the study of African history and being an expert at the law within the United States.
You know, that's an issue that I've had to face over the years because I was trained as an attorney, but while in college I majored in history. And though I had decided early on that I wanted to enter the field of law, as I was being trained, as I was learning the curricula that was given us on the college level, I decided to major in history, and I began to study the history of black people as it was revealed. Sometimes you had to read between the lines, but in various courses. And I began to think, you know, this is not right, the way it was presented. And I'll never forget, I was in a philosophy class, and one of my classmates had a book entitled Sex and Race, a History of Caucasian Negro Mixing Over the Ages. And it had all kinds of historical tidbits in it, and it was by J.A. Rogers. So I left there and went to the bookstore and found and read all of the books that he had on the subject. And so I decided early on that in spite of the fact that I wanted to become an attorney as my profession, my work, I felt, would be in the field of history, because it was important, I felt, for the world to know how great black people had been, and that black people were the fathers of the parents of the human race, and laid the foundation of civilization. So the other point, too, was that I knew that the area of history that I would want to pursue would not be popular on a college campus, so it'd be easy to terminate me if I were pursuing the truth as I saw it. Whereas the field of law, I could do whatever I wanted, you know, and then not be stopped. So I said I would develop a marriage between the two. And over the past, ever since I've been practicing law, which is 45 years, I've, since the 70s, married the two in various ways. And so I've been able to fulfill my goals in that regard.
Wonderful. And so do you have a specialty or a specialization within the study of black history of African people on a global scale?
You know, there's so many areas in which you could specialize, but as I was learning about it, initially, the thing that was most surprising to me was that Africans came to America thousands of years before Columbus. I'll never forget that I discovered, my first article I read on that was in 1963. And I was right after that, I attended UCLA, and I'll never forget writing an essay on it, and my professor said, my God, I've never heard of this before. Well, the evidence is there, and here we are 50 years later, and people act in disbelief or respond in disbelief when you present it. As a matter of fact, there's widespread attention with respect to the matter now on social media, because, you know, with the internet you can get material out. The response of some of our Latino and Native American brothers and sisters is that we are stealing their history. And recently I decided to respond to that, because there are vicious attacks on Dr. Van Sertima and various other scholars who've presented outstanding evidence to this effect. And my statement was, to our Latino and Native American brothers and sisters, Afrocentrists did not introduce the idea that black people came to America before Columbus. It was, number one, the Native Americans. Number two, European explorers, including Columbus. Number three, white historians, and number 4, Mexican historians. So black scholars simply compiled the material and published it, but others presented it and documented it. The other area that I focused on was, of course, ancient Kemet, Egypt, because that's a civilization that was the mother culture of the entire world. Of course, the seed culture for Egypt was Nubia, but the Nile Valley was the womb of world civilization. And in my pursuing that, my focus became the 18th dynasty. And that was triggered by an article written by William Leo Hansberry in Ebony magazine back in 1965. And I'll never forget it because he was such an extraordinary scholar. He'd been teaching at Howard for years and was of African American scholars, he was the best trained and the most specialized with respect to African history. And he did a special, Egypt's Golden Past, and talked about the 18th dynasty. Well, 11 years later, they brought the King Tut exhibit to the United States, and King Tut was born into that dynasty. So I knew all about it, and when the exhibit, which traveled all across America, reached Los Angeles, we had an entire presentation that we made in the media, at schools and colleges and universities, on the elementary and secondary level, et cetera. So the 2 areas in which I have been most involved in terms of study and inquiry have been the presence of Africans in the New World before Columbus and ancient Egypt, with a specific specialty there in the 18th dynasty.
So can you speak to us a little bit about your experience with how the King Tut exhibition has been presented in Los Angeles and the overall depiction of Egyptian history in the United States?
Yeah, it's at the outset, when I was a student, they claimed that the Egyptians were white. And notice they'll say that Egypt is in the Middle East, the Near East,
right,
the Mediterranean, the Orient, even the Fertile Crescent. Egypt was and still is in Africa. And the indigenous Egyptians were black Africans.
Yes.
There's no question about that. Their country they call their country Kemet, meaning land of the blacks. Now, Egyptologists have pretended that they were referring to the soil. Well, they have hieroglyphic symbols that depict what they meant. And a village, a city, a state, or country was designed with a circle enclosing a cross, which meant city, like an intersection. And when coupled with black town, black city, etc., they had a symbol for soil. They did not use it to describe their country or their people, so that was nonsense. When we began to present information on the ancient Egyptians being black, was indeed, as you raised in your question, during the King Tut exhibit. That provided us with the greatest opportunity to do so, because I believe it is the most widely viewed exhibit of artifacts of antiquity in the world. And the last time I was in Los Angeles, for example, I understand that $168 million were made as a result of its presence and the fact that so many tourists came to see it. The King Tut exhibit has visited the United States on 2 occasions, in 1976 through 79, and then beginning in 2005. I don't know the period during which it was in the United States at that time. And it's due to return to Los Angeles on March 24th, 2018. Now, they cleverly distracted people from the possibility that King Tut was black by, in the first catalog, stating that any depictions of him in dark colors had no ethnic significance. In the second catalog, they depicted him, they did it, as my friend Nzinga Ratabisha Heru would say, a modern makeover. They depicted him as looking like Boy George. This time, we don't know what they have in mind. What is important for black people to understand is there's no guesswork here. Many people send off to find out what their heritage is through the DNA sites. They've done DNA studies of King Tut and his royal family. DNA Tribes Digest, a site, a website and a research entity, did research on it that was published on January 1st, 2012. And they examined King Tut's mummy, the mummy believed to be his father, the mummy now believed to be his mother, his maternal grandparents and great-grandparents, perhaps his brother Smenkhare. With respect to the three that are relevant to us here, King Tut's mother they now believe to be Nefertiti. Her DNA markers were 82% affiliated or related to the people of sub-Saharan Africa. That's the blackest part of Africa, okay? Akhenaten, her husband and King Tut's father, it is now believed, his DNA markers were 92% related to the people of sub-Saharan Africa. As of the boy king himself, his DNA markers were 96% related to the people of sub-Saharan Africa. So when on February 5th of 2018, NBC's Today Show unveiled a statue of Nefertiti based on the mummy that they found and now claim was she, and that she was King Tut's mother, when they depicted her as white, they either did so in ignorance or deliberately deceived the public, because anyone with 82% of their genetic markers related to sub-Saharan Africa could not have been white. Mm-hmm. Furthermore, the depiction of Queen Nefertiti, which looks more white, we say, well, that looks like Lena Horne, but assuming that it's Caucasian is the one that's so popular and the rest of the world sees as reflecting ancient Egypt. Mm-hmm. Several scientists and scholars have said it's phony, it's a fake, okay? And furthermore, that is not the only depiction of her. 85% of the sculptures and 94% of the paintings of Nefertiti show her as a black woman, sometimes with her hair in cornrows. Mm-hmm. You follow me? So there's no dispute. We always knew that the bulk of the evidence suggests that she was black. Mm-hmm. But as we in law would say, the mummy is the best evidence. You can't dispute that. So today we're demanding that when the Tut exhibit comes to Los Angeles, they declare to the world that this was a black pharaoh. You follow me? In the old days, there could have been some issue. We aren't sure. Now they know. Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, and I'm glad that you brought up the law. Is there any legal grounding at all to make an argument that there is an obligation based on the facts that you have and other scholars and historians have identified through thorough research investigations, and we know that the identity of these pharaohs are black? Is there an obligation to report this as historical truth?
Well, it seems like the nation is now consumed in fake news, and there's no obligation as a people, with our tradition being rooted in Ma'at, justice, righteousness, and truth. We would say that you're obligated to tell the truth. The Western world does not feel that way at all, and the academic, scientific, media establishments, they have deliberately suppressed, distorted, or ignored black history and culture. And even with this evidence, I'm sure they'll present some skewed argument to discredit it. There is no obligation except truth-telling. We have to, as we've done in the past, Dr. King taught us and so forth, mount a vigorous response to the lies, as we did in 2005. Mm-hmm. We had a dignified but vehement response to the depiction of King Tut as Boy George, you follow. We have to tell our children, we have to teach this in our churches, we have to teach this in our schools, and we have to have it on social media. Mm-hmm. And we have to confront, in other words, tell truth to power, And so they don't have an obligation, but they can be forced to do it. And when the public realizes, you've got the DNA evidence, the whole idea is to sway the public, to sway public opinion. And we can do that. And if the scientific establishment or the museum officials won't, then we have to just to expose them as liars, as I am seeing often today in our media, where they expose some of our political officials in such a way.
And so you spoke to your experiences being a scholar and writing an essay, and your professor responding saying that they had never heard of this information. And I think a lot of our people, especially our young people, experience a similar denial of what they're presenting as truth, or even gaslighting upon expressing these truths. And so for everyone watching, and for those of us who want to take this message and carry it on, what would you say are 3 to 5 maybe key points that if someone was to say, oh no, King Tut was a black man, and someone responds by saying, oh no, that's not true, that's false, how can someone be prepared to back up that evidence, to back up that statement?
That is so important. I'm so glad you asked that, because with social media being so pervasive and everyone now getting in, becoming part of various controversial issues, and the popularity of talking points, it is the average person now steps forward with his position. And I think that's very important. One could argue, number one, Egypt is in Africa. Okay.
Great point. So Egypt is in Africa.
Right. Number two, the ancient Egyptians describe, they call the land of Egypt they refer to as Kemet, which means the Black Land.
The Black Land.
Number three, the mummies that have been discovered are African, or what they used to call Negroid, in terms of the morphology, the structure, the melanin content, and so forth. Number four, the ancient eyewitnesses, whether they were Greek, Roman, Hebrew, or otherwise, described the ancient Egyptians as black-skinned with woolly hair. You know? And number five, the culture of the ancient Egyptians survives today in various parts of Africa. You do not see such cultural survivals in Western Asia or Europe. You see, it's only Africans who appear to have embraced the culture because it's indigenous. And this is, interestingly, in terms of the survival of the culture, in the recent movie Black Panther. There are remnants of it there, especially when you look at Angela Bassett, who's just absolutely beautiful. She looks like Nefertiti, the headdress and everything. It brings to mind that history. And what is also interesting, because by and large, in the previous documentaries, films, etc., on the ancient Egyptians, they show them as white. These people, who are not specifically identified as ancient Egyptians, their costumes, the colors, seem to be so synchronized with their skin color. They seem natural. Whereas when you see Yul Brynner and so forth in the Ten Commandments, he doesn't even look right. You follow? And that, I believe, is part of what's resonating with the public. This is a natural revelation of a culture that may be mythological, in quotes, but the trappings appear to be a part of an indigenous people, and it looks, as I said, natural to me. You follow? So those five, I think, would be points of departure. And it's sort of like someone was asking me once about, well, was Hannibal black? I said, well, there's a coin that appears to reflect him, and the tradition is that he was, but we're not absolutely sure. The point is, you have to shift the burden, as we say in law, shift the burden of proof. The assumption is that he was. You disprove it. You follow? The ancient Egyptians were black Africans. If you don't believe that, then you disprove that they were. I'm not going to have to prove it anymore. The evidence is there. The record is there. If you don't believe it, then you disprove it. And the other thing, especially for our young people, you must understand that with respect to your white professors and friends and so forth, this completely overturns their paradigms. It completely, it blows out their sockets. It presents a universe with which they're unfamiliar. It reminds me of Dr. Tony Humber, one of our great scholars, who takes tours Mexico and takes young students down there and shows them the African presence in the New World before Columbus. we forced the Los Angeles County Museum of Art to hold a symposium on the origin of the Olmec culture, a culture that was very strongly influenced by Africans. And the stone heads, the figurines, the relics, the fossils, and so forth, suggest the presence of black people. When she was presenting it at the museum to a group of 600 people, several of the white people walked out. Now, you may not agree with something, but if you pretend to be a scholar, an academician, a scientist, you're supposed to give it an opportunity to be presented, to view it from every angle. There's nothing objective about these people, nothing. And see, we are hoodwinked or deceived into believing, oh, they're scientists. They're not. They're propagandists, and they often tell lies and suppress information. It's deliberate. And it's been a long-standing practice of Europeans to inferiorize black people and to prop themselves up as superior. None of this is true. I mean, we must reject that and tell our own truth to each other and to the world.
And we were speaking earlier about the unveiling of Nefertiti on the Today Show, I believe it was.
Yes, it was.
And within the timing of the release of Black Panther. And so as you're speaking, that there is no coincidence or random acts that are ever taking place, especially within the media. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
I sure do. It's, it's conspiratorial, it's deliberate. And we must understand that. I didn't see it personally, but someone sent it to me online, and it was Josh, I can't think of his last name, who is apparently one of the hosts of the Travel Channel. He was a guest on NBC's Today Show on February 5th of 2018, and there was a lot of fanfare and sensationalism around the fact that he'd been to Kemet, Egypt, and they had identified a long existing mummy as Nefertiti. And so he turned over to the sculptress by the name of Daynes, D-A-Y-N-E-S, to have her depict the sculpture as to how she felt Nefertiti would have looked based on the mummy. And it was unveiled, and she was depicted as white. And it was unbelievable. It was so patently a lie and a distortion of the truth. And so immediately black people on social media started talking about it, and I was in the two different stores, and each time I saw a black lady with a T-shirt of King Tut. The first time I said, "Oh, it's a really beautiful T-shirt." I was commenting it, and I told her, I said, "Are you aware of the fact that they have depicted Queen Nefertiti's mother as?" "Oh yes, they depicted her as white. I saw that. She just went off. This is an ordinary lady at Staples, a store in the Los Angeles area." And 2 or 3 days later, I was at CVS, and a sister had on a T-shirt with King Tut, and it was another beautiful one. It was a sweatshirt actually. And I said, "Ma'am," I said, "that's so beautiful. Where did you get it?" She told me. I said, "Did you hear about?" "Yes, I heard about Queen Nefertiti." And that was she. So it resonated with black people. This is a lie.
Right.
And I was so happy about it because the sisters, including my mother for years, wore the medallion.
Right.
And the earrings with Queen Nefertiti. And as you pointed out, what struck me as you pointed out, deliberate, was that this occurred in February, Black History Month. It occurred just a week or so before the opening of Black Panther, in which a sister literally looks like Nefertiti, and it occurs 6 or 8 weeks before the opening of the King Tut exhibit in Los Angeles. We're saying Nefertiti was white. We're saying she was King Tut's mother, so he had to be white.
Right.
All of this is deliberate, and it's to suppress the reality and the truth about the history of black people, and we have to oppose it.
Right. Have you and your organization been taking an active role in contacting any city officials in regard to the exhibit taking place?
The King Tut, yes.
Yes.
We have been. We've sent different people across America, actually have been, upon becoming aware of it, have sent letters and have talked about it on social media, have contacted in the Los Angeles area where it's supposed to appear. It's supposed to be here from March of 2018 to January of 2019, and then I think it goes to Britain. We have contacted the various officials, and also American Express that's sponsoring it, and saying that you have an obligation to tell the world that this most famous of exhibits is of the treasures of a black man. And there's no question about it now because you've got the DNA evidence.
Right.
So yes, we have done it. Now, in 1976, when it first came out, we had a committee. We called it the Black King Tut Committee. And my partner and I, my buddy we were doing the research, were on every radio, every television program, and we had the depictions of his mother and father. It was incredible. And black people saw me all over the city. I didn't know the Egyptians were black. I didn't know he was black. And they juxtaposed me, in particular, with Egyptologists. And we went back and forth. It was an interesting experience because though we've been inundated with their perspective, they were unfamiliar with our research and flabbergasted. And I'll never forget, I was on television with Dr. Kenneth Weeks because he had a panel associated with the King Tut exhibit, and there were two white women. One was talking about the artwork, and the other was talking about the marketplace associated with the exhibit. And I was there to say that he was black. And so Kenneth Weeks is a very widely known and respected Egyptologist. Said, we have here LeGrand Clegg, an attorney, which was meant to discredit me, who has the intriguing theory that King Tut was black rather than white. And I presented all of my evidence. He said I was an attorney, right? So I presented all my slides and everything. And he said, well, they were a mixed people, and that's the work of Shekinah Job, and there really isn't any evidence of that. So then I turned around and I said, the ancient Hebrews, Greeks, Romans, and all other eyewitnesses described the ancient Egyptians as black Africans. It's only modern Egyptology that has taken exception to that. He turned as red as a beet. You follow me? And I wanted to say, well, you said I was an attorney. Attorneys get the last word. You follow me? Right. But we, at this point, it's sort of like my good friend told me when we were holding a press conference in 2005. She said, LeGrand, are we still fighting this battle? These white people are not going to surrender Egypt to black people. We have to demand it. And right now, in support of us, is Black Panther. I think it's opening the door to the truth about the history of black people. And it's great, the profit that it's made will I believe, cause the movie industry to pursue this kind of movie and documentaries, etc., just for the sake of making money. And that's fine. I don't care what the reason is for doing it. We just want the truth to be out there.
And in my experience, it seems that the most powerful way for us to be able to transfer this power and to change the narrative surrounding Egypt and all of our great ancestors and rulers is to provide this information within our own communities, because we can spend days, years going back and forth with folks outside of our community about this information. But if at the end of the day we don't know it for ourselves, then there's still a disparity. Yes. And so, we're privileged to be able to sit here, have this conversation. We're on the same page. We're in agreement. We have access to language and ideas that has been, like we said, deliberately hidden from the majority of people in our communities. So what are some of the ways that we can take this information, make it accessible to those of us who need it the most, so that we can change the narrative within our own community, starting there?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, that the media is critical in terms of revelation.
Okay.
And the day after Black Panther, for example, opened, the Los Angeles Times had on its cover page a story about black people's response to Black Panther. There are many, many extraordinary statements by black people, but one of them stuck with me, and that was this lady said, "I have bought 4 dashikis for me and 4 dashikis for my son." We are going to see the movie 4 times in 4 different theaters and wear a different dashiki each time.
Beautiful.
That shows a seismic shift in our consciousness. We have to capitalize on that in whatever way we can. I have for 55 years waited for this day that black people embrace this and understand it. Since it makes profit in the Western world, then, since it's profitable in the Western world, then perhaps it'll have a whole life of its own. Secondly, this is media too. On social media, there's so much there, and our people are on there every day. We have to continue to put this information out, given that now there's this thirst for it. It's always been there, Bernoka Rashidi, Ashraf Kwesi, Dr. Ben, I go down the list. They were putting it out, and there were people listening to them and attending their lectures and all. But now, people, as you're pointing out, people are coming thirsting, asking for the information. Someone was told me that at, I think it's a Carson Mall here in the Los Angeles area, that a lady who sells African clothes says, my God, she can't believe the demand that she has faced since this movie came out. If we recall, and you're too young to know, the 60s, the energy and consciousness of the 60s was partly brought to a halt by Superfly and that whole pursuit of drugs and dressing like him and black men straightening their hair, all of that.
And COINTELPRO.
And COINTELPRO, indeed so. But the media influence, it shows how effective it can be. I'm hoping and praying for a resurrection of that kind of thing, but in a positive way with respect to the revelation of our history and culture.
Right.
And in that same vein, I was just noticing how events unfold to our benefit. Back in the 1920s, when Dr. Carter G. Woodson initiated Negro History Week, it was the second week in February. During the 60s, it became Black History Month. Today, from the beginning of January, when people started preparing for the Dr. King holiday, to March 1st, that entire 2 months is devoted to black people. You follow? So, the movement is occurring in a positive way. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes we're not even consciously guiding it, but it's happening. And we must continue to follow this, to encourage it, to lead it as we can. And given, again, the profitability of Black Panther, there's great hope. When I sat there and nobody used the N word, nobody used the MF word, nobody used B and W, all that, none of that trash that Hollywood has imposed on our children through rappers who were told, if you do decent rap, you're not going to have any opportunities to share it. This is very interesting to me, and it's something that we must maintain.
Absolutely, I absolutely agree. Are there any opportunities, since the exhibit will be here in Los Angeles, are there any opportunities for the community to come out and participate? I know you mentioned letter writing. Do you all have any other forms of protest, civil disobedience, or other ways that you plan to intervene throughout the duration of the exhibit to ensure that the facts are being presented? Yes,
we do. We at the absolute least, we plan to hold a demonstration on the day that it is that it opens.
Okay.
Because that's when the media generally will be there and so forth and so on. And what we're doing is capitalizing on the fact that this is provides world attention.
Right.
And we're telling the world that he was black. It's interesting, when we did it in 2005, Zahi Hawass, who was head of ancient Egyptian antiquities, the Arab Egyptologist, denied it. They're different. They weren't black Africans, blah, blah. Well, now we have the DNA evidence.
Right.
You follow? So he can't tell that lie again. Or even if he tells it, it's easily refutable. I remember a woman from a major radio station interviewed me. She said, well, the Egyptologists say that you're wrong, blah, blah. I said, the Egyptologists are not agreed among themselves. Oh, is that true? Yes, it's true. You follow me? Well, now, with this hard and fast evidence, then you must go out and find people who can scientifically refute this.
Right.
You need, in that way. In the same vein, in November and December of 2016, our organization, the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations, and the Committee for the Elimination of Media Offensive to African People, held a demonstration before the Los Angeles Opera, which had an opera entitled Akhenaten, and featuring the father of King Tut and the co-regent and husband of Queen Nefertiti, depicting him as white. And the media covered our demonstrations, very peaceful and informative. And what we found interesting is the number of white people who came, well, we knew that he was black. Jesus was black too. You know what I'm saying? Well, then you need to tell the people of the opera that. And I will tell you this, though, I've been demonstrating since 1962 on one level or another. The people at the Los Angeles County Museum Opera were exceedingly solicitous, cooperative, and in every way wanted to address our needs. I have to tell you that I was stunned. What should we do? What can we do? They even passed out our brochure, to correct the record. And they said, we pick people according to talent. I might pick you to play Abraham Lincoln, for example, if my talent would reflect, you see. And I said to them, I understand that, and it's unfortunate that we have to start with you in this regard. But the American media have, for the last time, distorted and degraded the image of black people. We are demanding that our people be presented correctly. I said it's like to depict Akhenaten as white would be like depicting Dr. King as white. And our children are entitled to the benefit of their heritage. We are sick of white people claiming black figures, whether it's Akhenaten or Hannibal or the Moors or whoever else. So we plan to, the other thing we hope to do is what I've seen done with respect to Black Panther. Maybe we could do a GoFundMe page and, try to bring black children from the inner city to the exhibit, and also to encourage our churches and other institutions to do so. I know in 2005, at my church where I grew up, we had took a whole busload of people out to see the exhibit of King Tut, and Sister Sakara, who does the Queens of the Nile now, had her son there dressed in regalia, the black regalia, and it was interesting because the church members were standing out, and I gave them a talk on a bullhorn prior to their going in. And would you believe that one of the directors or representatives of the museum had the audacity to come out asking if I would allow him to welcome them and so forth. I said, the only thing you can do is apologize for having King Tut depicted as white as Boy George. I said, that's an outrage. And I spoke to the congregation. I told them what he was there for. I said, I'm not allowing him to do it because he refuses to apologize for distorting our history. So when he saw me inside, I just wish you had allowed me to do that. I said, well, how dare you? Well, this is artistic license. I said, no, it's racism. That's what it is, and we're not tolerating it anymore. You follow? So, but we have to get the word out. We've got to do articles, just like I did on the Nefertiti piece, and send it all over, and just reiterate the truth. sometimes other groups of people are interested in hearing our truth. And especially do I think this will be so, again, with Black Panther. You know, it's opening up people's eyes. And I know when they had the Olmec exhibit, and Dr. Humber made her presentation at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, Dr. Humber received her PhD from Howard. Mm-hmm. And so when they presented the Black people, yay. Well, afterwards, some of the white people, we didn't think we were going to be at a pep rally, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. They were putting it down because they were facing truth and had to look for minutiae to criticize. Mm-hmm. In any case, Tony did a tour of the Negroid Olmec artifacts. And she said, one white lady came and said, I don't care what those white people say. I want to come here to hear what you have to say about this. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, too, when I wasn't present the day, when they had their symposium and did not present the evidence, they did not acknowledge that these were Black people. Some of our people were there, and one of them got up and said, look, I'm a taxpayer, and you have an obligation to tell these people that those stoneheads represent Africans who came to America before Columbus. And they were denying and so forth and so on. And on the panel was a Native American. And it was interesting, she said, you know, there's a lot of racism in archaeology. And it is absurd to claim that those relics and those stoneheads don't represent Africans who came to America before Columbus. Mm-hmm. That was a mutiny. The point I want to raise to you, though, is after the symposium, the whites were furious because, after all, this is a taxpayer-funded facility. There are other ideas here that you're not presenting. And so for us to get up and say, look, we're taxpayers, you've got the obligation, we had every right to do that. But even if it weren't, we have every right to, as you're saying, pursue truth. But in the aftermath, when some of the scholars approached our people who had commandeered the symposium, how do you like taking over, blah, blah. Yes, we enjoyed it because we wanted to reveal the truth to you. And so one of my colleagues was confronted by a scholar, and he was talking about the whole issue. And he says, just like King Tut, you want to claim he was white? And said, oh, no, the ancient Egyptians were Black Africans. They were Black. We were flabbergasted because that's such a rare admission. Mm-hmm. You see, and we understand why. The Egyptians laid the foundation of global civilization. They taught the Greeks everything they knew. You follow? And the white people don't want to acknowledge that.
Right.
So, but as Dr. King said, truth pressed to the ground will rise again.
Absolutely. So are there any key dates, locations, times, if people are interested in participating, should they just show up on the day of the unveiling, or is there an opportunity for us to come together first as a community and do a little bit of organizing prior to that day?
You know, we have, everybody's been so busy. We've not planned a presentation prior to the opening.
Okay.
The good thing is that it'll be here so long, so we have the opportunity to bring children there, to take children there, to talk about it, to make presentations. For example, I was told at Esalen they'd allow me to do one at Esalen Bookstore. We're asking people to come out on the 24th of March,
okay,
which is the date on which the exhibit will open. That is the date when the media will be there and all the attention will be focused on it. So we're asking for that.
Okay.
And but with respect to others, we're planning. It's in the planning stage. And while we want to, especially given the pervasiveness of the social media, we can have a simultaneous revelation even when we're not having demonstrations there. Mm-hmm. You follow? So we could have ongoing streams of consciousness that can be punctuated by different programs, pickets, mm-hmm. demonstrations at the actual site. Right. And the site will be the Science Center on Exposition across from USC. Okay. Before it's been held at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, but this year that's where they're hosting it.
Okay. And I ask simply because in my experiences with community organizing, and this, again, especially with young people, there's a lot of folks who are interested in doing this type of work and protesting, but a lot of times folks don't know where to go, how to become connected with organizations that are doing the work. and how to really involve themselves in a way that they feel will be meaningful. And so I know organizations like yours, the work of Dr. Rashidi, for example. I've co-founded an organization, the African Diaspora Alliance, and so we are creating spaces not only when we're going to disrupt what's already taking place, but then to add something to the space as well. And so when we go into schools, for example, and provide space to have these kinds of conversations, to give this type of information and education to our young people because they're not getting it in public schools or private schools, they start to really see a complete transformation in their understanding of themselves and their understanding of the world, and in their ability to go out and make some real change on behalf of their community and future generations. So I think it's definitely important for us to be able to, let everyone know who's watching that they're free to come out on that day and be in solidarity with us as a community as we work to rectify the situation and provide the truth.
That is absolutely true. I remember how when I first came to understand how great our history was, it was just in a classroom, as I mentioned earlier, and I've seen other young people in particular, just their eyes light up. In the article that talked about Black Panther, they talked about black children who now want to go to Africa.
Absolutely.
And one of the mothers said, well, that's a mythological place. Well, I still want to go. You see that interest, the self-respect, you follow? And so your point is well taken, and people do want to participate.
Right. And even on that notion, I think if we're saying things that we know to be true, such as African people were the first to circumnavigate the globe, but you've never left Baltimore, or you've never left Chicago, or you've never left Oakland or Los Angeles or St. Louis, and the only images that you've seen depicted of other Black people in Africa are degrading images, and you've never even seen any other images of Black people outside of the United States or outside of Africa, it's hard to kind of put all those pieces together. Well, what does it mean for African people to have been the first to go around the globe? But then you might have an opportunity to travel somewhere through organizations like the one that I've co-founded, or the work that Dr. Rashidi does, and be able to see for your own eyes in Cuba or Brazil or Mexico or India or Colombia that there are other Black people, and hey, that person looks just like me, that person looks like my uncle, that person looks like my grandma, and all of these things that we're either picking up in bits and pieces through the media or through movies or social media or school start to really come together. And so I think just as a people, it's so important for us to really extend these opportunities as much as possible to the youth, so that not only are we getting this education in school, but they're able to experience it for themselves, and it really becomes real. And I think, like we've been saying, Black Panther and seeing Wakanda, although it was fictional, as we're saying, definitely shifts the collective consciousness of our people.
As we close, you absolutely are hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And what really revealed it for me was someone took my tape, When Black Men Rule the World, and put it online. Over 2 million hits. And just, on that subject. So this has been wonderful. I appreciate the interview.
Yes, this was so great. Thank you so much again for joining us. And if I don't see you before, I will definitely see you during the unveiling demonstration. I will be there.
Fantastic. I look forward to that.
Exclusive. 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 Exclusive.